Okay, so have you ever felt like you're going to be found out?
Found out.
Yeah, like you're pretending to be successful, but deep down, you're a total phony, and everyone's going to realize it any minute.
Oh, I know that feeling. Like you're not as competent or as experienced as everyone thinks you are.
Exactly. That, my friend, is imposter syndrome. And get this, a crazy 70% of people experience it. It's like the secret struggle so many of us share.
It's that feeling of not really deserving your accomplishments. Like you're a fraud, even with all the evidence saying otherwise.
Yes, and it can really hold you back, especially, when it comes to putting yourself out there, which is what's so interesting about what we're diving into today.
Interesting how?
Well, we're going to explore how podcasting, of all things, can actually help overcome those pesky imposter feelings.
Really? Because for me, imposter syndrome often rears its ugly head when I think about personal branding. That fear of not having, like, a good enough story or enough experience to share.
Wait, hold on. You're saying that feeling like an imposter can actually stop us from, sharing our stories? But isn't that, the whole point of personal branding?
It is. Personal branding is about owning your story, your experiences, your expertise. But imposter syndrome makes you question if your story is even worth sharing. It's a weird paradox.
That is ironic, right? Because podcasting is all about sharing your story, your experiences, often with thousands of people. You're putting yourself out there in such a real, unscripted way. And for many people, I imagine, that feels incredibly vulnerable.
You're right. It is vulnerable. And, I think that vulnerability is key. The beauty of podcasting is you don't need to be the world's leading expert. It's about sharing your authentic self, the unique perspective you bring to the table.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see how this might work. But I have to ask, how does, showing up imperfectly in front of potentially tons of listeners, how does that actually help you feel less like an imposter? It seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But that's where the real magic happens. When you embrace vulnerability and authenticity, you connect with people. And those connections, they're the foundation for something much bigger.
Whoa, okay. So we've established imposter syndrome is something tons of people deal with, but it sounds like it can be especially tricky when we're talking about personal branding. So why is podcasting the antidote? Let's unpack that. So we're talking about podcasting as this unexpected way to combat imposter syndrome, which is fascinating, right? But it's not like you suddenly stop feeling like an imposter the second you hit record, right?
No, not at all. It's a process for sure.
Right.
More about the subtle yet really powerful shifts that happen gradually.
Okay, so walk me through it. What are those shifts?
Well, think about it this way. When a podcast host reaches out, inviting you to be a guest, is because they see something unique in your perspective.
Right.
They value why you bring to the table. They're not looking for the world's leading expert. They want you.
That's a good point. It takes the pressure off needing to be the be-all and end-all of a topic.
Exactly. It's about sharing your authentic take, your own piece of the puzzle, and that's enough.
So it's less about being perfect and more about just showing up as you are.
Precisely. And each time you do that, each time you share those experiences and insights, it builds your confidence.
Yeah.
When you start to internalize, hey, my voice actually matters.
Yeah.
I have something valuable to contribute.
Yeah, it's like flexing a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And what's so interesting to me is that podcasts are, by nature, unscripted. You're not reading from a teleprompter. It's just a raw, genuine conversation.
And that rawness, that realness, is what makes podcasting so powerful. When you're just yourself, flaws and all, it resonates on a much deeper level. Especially in a world obsessed with, those perfectly curated online personas, authenticity cuts through the noise.
It's like a breath of fresh air. And this isn't just us, waxing poetic about it. We actually have research to back this up. Right?
Oh, absolutely. There are studies showing that authenticity is a major factor for people when deciding which brands they trust.
Okay, so how does that play out?
Well, for example, Stackla found that a whopping 86% of consumers say authenticity is a key factor in their purchasing decisions.
Wow, 86%. So being real isn't just some feel-good thing. It translates into real trust, real credibility.
100%. Think about it. People can spot a phony a mile away. But when you're genuine, vulnerable, it shines through. And that makes people want to listen to you, connect with you. They trust you.
Okay, this is all making so much sense. We've covered the why podcasting can be such a powerful tool against imposter syndrome. But let's get practical here. What about the how? How do we actually overcome those feelings and show up authentically?
The million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It all starts with acknowledging those imposter feelings.
So instead of pushing those feelings down, we lean into them? What does that even look like?
It's about recognizing those feelings without letting them control you. Remember, imposter syndrome is a feeling, not a fact. You're not actually a fraud. You just have these thoughts, doubts, and trust me, everyone does.
So how do we, move past those imposter feelings and actually take action? It feels kind of, I don't know, daunting to put yourself out there when you're dealing with all that self-doubt.
It's definitely a process. One powerful shift is to really focus on the audience.
The audience.
Yeah, instead of feeling like that spotlight's on you, burning a hole, shift that light onto the people you want to help.
Okay, so less about me, and more about them. But how does that help with the whole imposter thing?
Well, when you're focused on providing value to others, it becomes less about being perfect and more about connecting, right? You're sharing experiences that might resonate, offering a different perspective, maybe just letting them know they're not alone.
That's such a good point. It takes the pressure off needing to have all the answers.
Exactly. It allows you to be more present, authentic, which is
Right.
key. Remember, people connect with vulnerability, realness, not perfection.
So it's okay if those experiences aren't perfectly polished success stories.
More than okay. Those imperfections often make your story relatable, you know? Don't be afraid to talk about challenges, lessons learned. Those are powerful.
It's about the journey, not just the destination.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to celebrate even the small wins. Got that podcast interview, win. Positive feedback from a listener, win. Each one chips away at that imposter syndrome.
It's like you're reminding yourself of how far you've come. Speaking of which, I think a real-world example would be helpful here. What about Tice Gibson? What's her story?
Oh, Tice is a fantastic example of someone who used podcasting not just to share her message, but to overcome her own imposter syndrome.
Really? How so?
Well, she was really open about her journey, both the highs and the lows. She leaned into her story, even the messy parts, and it resonated. People connected with her vulnerability, her authenticity.
So she wasn't afraid to get real, even when it was tough.
Exactly. She owned her story, and that's ultimately what helped her build a following and become a thought leader.
It's proof you don't have to have it all figured out to make a difference. It's about having the courage to share your story, even if it's still being written.
Perfectly said. The key takeaway here is consistency over perfection. Every time you share your voice, you're building that confidence, chipping away at imposter syndrome, moving closer to sharing your authentic self with the world.
This has been amazing. So much to think about. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this deep dive, it's this: your voice matters. You have something unique to share, so don't let those imposter feelings hold you back. What's your story? What are you ready to share with the world?